Journeys of Return and Redemption, Haggai Chapter 2, The Contagion of Glory. The studio microphones catch the soft rustle of turning pages as the team aligns their historical notes for the final movements of the post-exilic reconstruction. Alex Rivera leans toward the console, checking the levels before opening the session. Welcome back to Journeys of Return and Redemption. In our last episode, we left the returned remnant standing on the dusty foundations of Jerusalem, staring down their own economic ruin and their paneled compromises. Today we cross the threshold into Haggai Chapter 2, where the psychological dust settles and the community faces an entirely new set of internal roadblocks. It is October of 520 BC, exactly 23 days after the physical labor on the house of the Lord finally resumed, and the initial wave of corporate enthusiasm has collided with a wall of harsh reality. Dr. Naomi shifts her notes to the center, matching the exact calendar markers embedded within the ancient scroll. The timing here is incredibly strategic, Alex. Haggai delivers this second oracle on the 21st day of the 7th month, which lines up precisely with the final day of the Feast of Tabernacles, a season traditionally designated for celebrating agricultural abundance and Solomon's historic temple dedication. But there is a massive psychological cloud hanging over this particular festival, because the elderly survivors in the crowd are looking at these new modest foundations and comparing them to the structural grandeur of the first temple. To them, this new layout looks like absolute nothingness, and that comparison is paralyzing the workforce. Sophia nods slowly, her focus turning toward the emotional weight of that intergenerational friction. You can feel the sheer exhaustion of trying to rebuild a broken life when your memory is constantly weaponizing the past against your present. It's a classic trap for any journey of return. We get so mesmerized by the scale of what was lost that we treat the small, messy beginnings of restoration as insignificant. But Haggai cuts straight through that grief with a triple rhetorical charge to, quote, be strong, delivered separately to the governor Zerubbabel, the high priest Joshua, and the working populace, anchoring their endurance not in the material wealth of the building, but in the permanent presence of the divine spirit that has remained with them since the exodus from Egypt. Father Elias leans forward, his voice resonant with the broader cosmic horizons of the passage. This is where the architecture of the story shifts from local construction to an apocalyptic breakthrough. God tells them that the structural inferiority they are weeping over is a temporary illusion because he is about to execute a sovereign shaking of the heavens, the earth, the sea, and the dry ground. He declares ownership over all global silver and gold supplies, promising that the material treasures of all nations will flow directly into these modest storehouses until the ultimate glory of this latter house eclipses the former layout, sealed by a permanent administrative decree of shalom. Rabbi Jonah marks a line in his Hebrew text, preparing to bridge the timeline into the next major development. But that cosmic reassurance is immediately stress-tested 2 months later, on the 24th day of the 9th month, when Haggai initiates a live, rapid-fire cross-examination of the priesthood regarding the technical legal boundaries preserved in the unchaptered layout of Ezekiel chapter 44. He poses a diagnostic riddle. If consecrated sacrificial meat touches the fold of a standard garment, does that fabric edge transfer holiness to ordinary food? The priests answer correctly based on the strict limits of the law. No, holiness cannot be passively broadcast through secondary textile contact. Then Haggai flips the vector. If a person defiled by contact with a corpse touches those same ordinary items, does it transfer uncleanness? The priests answer instantly, yes, the impurity spreads aggressively. Thomas taps his pen against his pad, processing the functional mechanics under the hood of the legal riddle. As an engineer, that reads like a perfect diagnostic on systematic contamination. Haggai springs a structural trap on the whole assembly. He uses their own priestly definitions to prove that while holiness is insulated and requires deliberate, sacrificial maintenance, defilement is highly volatile and communicates itself with absolute ease. He looks at the community and says that because they left the house of the Lord in ruins for 16 years while prioritizing their own real estate, their internal spiritual deadness has functioned exactly like a corpse. They thought that simply standing on holy ground or building a crude altar on the ruins would automatically sanitize their lives, but their baseline apathy was actually radiating outward, systematically contaminating their physical labor, their currency, and the very agricultural offerings they laid on the wood. Sophia leans in, her eyes scanning the dramatic transformation of the agricultural timeline. It's a sobering realization that our external religious performance cannot fix a corrupted internal engine. But notice the immediate grace that breaks through the moment they acknowledge this contamination and lay stone upon stone in the foundation. Haggai commands them to audit their empty barns, their blighted vines, and their non-producing olive trees, the physical scars of divine discipline. And then he issues an abrupt, unmerited legal decree of absolute blessing. From this day on, I will bless you. The moment the priority is set right, the pipeline of scarcity is broken. Dr. Naomi checks the final data block of the chapter, pointing to the secondary oracle delivered later that exact same afternoon. And that brings us to the highly personalized messianic pledge directed uniquely to Zerubbabel as the civil governor of Judah. While the global empires are locked in geopolitical chaos, with military chariots, horse teams, and foreign thrones decimating one another by the weapons of their own compatriots, God singles out this Davidic descendant. Father Elias smiles, tracing the redemptive reversal back to the ancestral wreckage of the exile. This is the ultimate closing of the loop, Naomi. Generations earlier, in Jeremiah chapter 22, verse 24, God had pronounced a devastating ancestral curse upon Zerubbabel's grandfather, King Jeconiah, declaring that even if Coniah were a signet ring on the divine right hand, he would be torn off and cast aside. But here, on the dusty floor of a half-built temple, God completely reverses the execution of that judgment. He tells Zerubbabel, "I will take you, my servant, and make you like a signet ring, for I have chosen you." The broken line of David is sovereignly reconstituted, and the legal instrument of divine authority is placed back on the hand of the king. Alex Rivera adjusts his microphone, looking out at the circle of panelists as the historical timeline readies itself for the next prophetic movement. The patterns of return are never about duplicating the physical grandeur of the past. They are about maintaining an active operational dependency on the living source, who rewrites our legacies of defilement into pipelines of blessing. As we conclude the brief, high-velocity ministry of Haggai, our next episode will trace the parallel visions of his contemporary, Zechariah, who pulls back the veil on the cosmic restoration of the priesthood and the final completion of the temple layout. I'm Alex Rivera, and this has been Journeys of Return and Redemption.